We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, An Introduction to Courageous Conversations for Emerging Leaders. We will let everyone just take a minute to join. And as we're waiting for everyone to come online, would love to know in the chat if you can see and hear us okay. Just pop a little yes in the comment if you can see and hear us. That would be wonderful. We'd also like to, if you could let us know while you're joining, while we're waiting for people to join, where you're from, where you're coming from today, your location, and also if you can, the organisation that you work for. I can see Peter, yes, fantastic. We've got people joining the chat. That is wonderful. So let us know your name, your location, and yeah, your organisation if you can too. Fantastic. So today, as emerging leaders, one of the most powerful skills we can develop is the ability to navigate difficult yet crucial conversations. So whether it's providing constructive feedback, maybe addressing challenges within your team, or engaging in simply open dialogue with peers and stakeholders, courageous conversations are an essential part of building trust and driving growth and leading with impact. So today's session, we're going to be exploring why courageous conversations are really vital for leadership success. And also, Phil and Lou are going to be speaking to some practical strategies that you can start applying right away after today's session. So whether you're just stepping into a leadership role or maybe you're looking to sharpen your communication skills, this webinar is going to equip you with some really great tools to lead with confidence, authenticity, and also empathy. So we encourage you, as we can see everyone's starting to pop into the chat now, we encourage you to engage in today's webinar, ask questions in the chat as we go along, and also write some notes, reflect on how you can apply these insights in your day-to-day work life. And then, of course, towards the end of the webinar today, we're also going to be sharing a little bit about our Leadership Excellence Program and how you can join us to continue that development as a leader. And at the very end of the session today, we're also going to be sharing how you can score a free gift simply for sharing your time with us today. So we're really excited to be sharing some amazing gifts today. Now, I would like to introduce two wonderful industry experts. We have Phillip Ralph, our founder and CEO of the Leadership Sphere, and Louise Duncan, a senior facilitator and all-round awesome human. Welcome to
That's nice, isn't it? That's a nice start.
Thank you.
Very good. So thank you, Kelly. Welcome everyone. It's lovely to see so many familiar names in the chat also. I'd just like to firstly acknowledge the traditional custodians of country and their connection to land, waters and community. We pay our respects to the elders past and present, for they hold memories, traditions, the culture and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across this nation, and we welcome any First Nations people who may be with us today. So in terms of the agenda today, it's going to be primarily in three parts: introduction to courageous conversations, then we'll have a window of time for Q&A, so both from yourselves and also Kelly, Lou and I will have a conversation as well around courageous conversations and what we're seeing in organisations today. And then, as Kelly mentioned, we'll also talk about leadership excellence with a couple of cool offers as well. All right, so by way of introduction, the Leadership Sphere, for those who don't know us, and many here are friends of the Leadership Sphere, but for those who don't know us, so we've been around since for 18 years now, and really provide leadership development solutions to leaders, teams, and organisations to help them thrive. We really love the work that we do, and we're really excited today to be able to bring some of that thinking to you today. And so thanks so much for joining. So by way of personal introduction, when I was 18, I didn't run away and join the circus. I ran away and joined Victoria Police, which was a bit weird, being a country kid, and moved to Melbourne. And you can see by some of the images there, my family think the photo of me is hilarious with the moustache. They call it something different, but I won't mention what they call it. So yeah, was with Victoria Police for 18 years, had an amazing journey, did a whole lot of things that I'm really proud of, I guess, in terms of training and development. And I was at the academy as an instructor. Also really helped reduce the incidence of fatal shootings at the time from 1 per month for 14 months, which was horrific, to none for 3 years, based on a 5-day training program, which is all about communication, conflict resolution, and acting in a very thoughtful way in the moment. I've written or contributed to 3 books. You can see in the top right-hand corner there. Also have a lovely family. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner. I spent 6 years at ANZ as the head of consulting and program delivery, where I met some of the people on the webinar today. So that's a little bit about me. Lou, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. So as Kelly and Phil have introduced, I'm Louise Duncan, a senior consultant, facilitator and coach at the Leadership Sphere. I have a background in psychotherapy, corporate training and the facilitation of both corporate and personal development programs. And I absolutely love what I do. And it's such a pleasure to be joining you here today on this webinar. The Leadership Excellence Program and Courageous Conversations, they're very close to my heart because they open up the possibility for us to just keep learning about ourselves. And that's really a core belief of mine. And it's what drives my work, whether that's in private practice, in facilitation, my studies. What I've got a little personal sort of piece down there as well in relation. My husband and I, we have 3, I'd like to say kids, but they're actually young adults now, young adult sons, a beautiful dog Lola. I go to the places of nature really to fill my cup so that I can continue doing what I just absolutely love to do, which is this work. And then those 3 images up the top are really about my why. And it's about staying curious, continuing to learn, and also supporting connection in our lives, whether that's internal as well as external, hopefully to bring joy in whatever way that means for an individual, whatever that way looks like. So that's just a little bit about me. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to jump straight into the content piece. Kelly, Phil and I, we were really keen for you to have something tangible to take away from your time with us this morning. And so this module around courageous conversations, it's our most asked for module. Whether that's as an individual model, it's included in all our leadership programs, from leadership excellence right through to organisational excellence, and most often in our coaching packages. And it's because for many of us, we acknowledge that you're technically excellent at what you do. And yet, no matter how much experience we have, no matter what level of leadership we are working in, all of us at different times in life struggle with having effective conversations. So this module is about practicing and fine-tuning exactly that. So where I'd like to begin is in relation to some information from Susan Scott and her Fierce Conversations. And she says that essentially when it comes to difficult conversations or conflictual conversations, that we tend towards one or the other. We either move towards or we move away from a difficult conversation. The word conflict, I'd just like to make a note, is that it can be fraught because it often has a really negative connotation. At the Leadership Sphere, we take a more neutral interpretation because conflict is not necessarily an argument or a fight. It's more that it may be disagreements. There may be opposing views. Emotions can be high, or all 3 of those elements. So what Susan says is that all of us tend towards one or the other. We either move towards or away. So what I would love, if that's okay, just take a moment to, if you've probably scanned through the avoiders and the seekers, if you can pop in the chat box, generally speaking, in a professional sense, where do you think you tend? Do you move towards? Do you move away from difficult conversations that you know you have? So pop it in the chat box. Do you tend to avoid or seek according to this criteria? And recognising that this may differ depending on the situation or the people involved. But it'll be great to hear, where do you think you probably sit? Just pop that in the chat box. Depends. Probably sit somewhere in the middle. Thanks, Stuart. Yes. Tend towards seek. Great. Thanks, Matt. Chelsea. Yes. On the situation. Mostly seek. Yep. Operating. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, it can depend on how difficult, how challenging the conversation could be. Middle, seek, also in the middle. Tend to seek. Avoid. Great. Thanks. Towards when it comes to work. After a lot of training, Nicole, I can relate. Yes, very much an avoider in my early life. I really actively worked on it. Avoider, generally. Great. Thank you. What this is it's just about starting to consciously think about how we are when it comes to difficult conversations, because we all have them at different times. Do we tend to move forward or away? Having to go more towards and seek lately. Thanks, Chelsea. Depends. Value harmony. Yes. Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. You can keep popping that through. It looks like a little more towards seeking in this group here present today. So continuing to think about conversations, these images just represent the Air Florida Flight 90 that tragically crashed into the 14th Street Bridge over the Pontomac River in 1982. And after extensive investigation, what they realised was there was definitely pilot error. And from the perspective that there were numerous protocols that weren't followed through, given it was exceptionally bad weather, sleet, snow, freezing, ice. As they started to dig a little bit deeper and they listened to the black box recording, what they also realised was that the first officer had tried on several occasions to highlight that what the instruments were telling them was not meeting reality. But they were very oblique comments. They were like, gee, it's not a great night for flying. Oh, look at the ice out there. And the pilot dismissed the concerns that the first officer was trying to raise and took off. So I'm just curious, with that very brief introduction, what do you think was the actual cause of the tragedy? And again, just pop any ideas into the chat box. Just navigating the little lag as well. Do you have any sense of what might have been the real cause or a large contributing factor to this accident? The role of power, yes. The pilot knew best. Thank you, Peter. The hierarchy, poor communication. Yep. Co-pilot not empowered. Yes, Stuart. Able to challenge the pilot. Absolutely. Yes. Great. The Qantas story. Thank you, Peter. Yeah. You will know that what I would like to say is that this is one of the worst aviation accidents in the US at that time, and the pilot knew better. Yeah, there was significant review of these protocols following this, because what they realised, and as you're all through your comments highlighting, there was a lack of a clear framework to challenge and to communicate the extent of the dangers that the co-pilot was seeing, the first pilot. Co-pilot passive, not listening to your team, overconfidence, yes. So this is what we're going to dive into a little more directly, but in an organisational context. Thank you. Yeah, you absolutely get not enough psych safety. So what I'd like to introduce you to, this is the work that is drawn from Kerry Patterson et al. From their book, Crucial Conversations. And what they say is that it's important to understand the level of conversation that we need to have, because depending on the level, it demands different elements from us. So what they say is there's 4 levels. The first, setting expectations. This is the coffee chat. It might be welcoming a new member. It might be, launching a program. The second is the coaching piece. So this is solution focused often. The coach is asking really good questions to get the coachees starting to think about the best way forward, to come up with ideas, to have a sense of ownership and energy about the way forward. The third level is crucial conversations, and this is where we're focusing today. These are the conversations that, if they're not initiated, they can potentially have serious consequences. So it could be in relation to getting feedback, communicating difficult decisions or information. And then the final level is the performance conversation. And this can actually have elements of all the three levels before it. These performance conversations traditionally were always sort of an annual conversation, but as organisations are evolving, we're realising that these need to be more frequent. As we move up the pyramid, what is important is that the planning and preparation increases. And this is what we're going to explore a little more fully in a moment. But first, I'd like to hand you over to Phil.
Thank you, Lou. I'll just unmute myself. You've already muted yourself. Excellent. So I love that framework. So this part before we get to the actual framework where you can use there's three frameworks going to present to actually have a conversation, so a very practical tool. We're just setting up some of the theory in the background here. And I love this model, again, from the book Crucial Conversations, which is one of the key texts that we draw from. But really, the goal is dialogue, and the process that gets us there is having sufficient safety and really being aware that each of us make up a story. I love what Brené Brown talks about. The story I make up is one of her rumble starters. And you can see from the arrows that are coming in from the left and the right that we see and hear something, we tell ourselves a story, and then, an emotion or a feeling is created, and then we act on that. And often we do that without testing our assumptions and testing the story that we're making up in our heads. I love the saying, this is my saying, by the way, don't believe everything you think. And I think that's so true in organizations. We tend to believe everything that we think, which is, erroneous. So what we're really seeking is to move into the center, that pool of shared meaning in the middle, where we can actually have a dialogue, not a monologue. So it's not one way. But in order for that to happen, we need to have, as Nicole put in the chat a moment ago, that sense of psychological safety. And if we have a lot of safety, then we can have a pretty robust discussion. We know that doesn't always happen, though. And so what can happen is we move into a couple of different places. One is into silence, or, that flight or freeze primitive reaction we have in our brains, which can manifest itself as masking, avoiding, or withdrawing. Or we can go the other way, violence, which is more that fight energy, which might be around attacking, labeling, and controlling. Just while I'm telling you about my habit, I will ask you to put in the chat what might be your kind of default. And I know it depends. Are you more the flight freeze kind of person, or are you more the fight? For me, I'm definitely more of a, not so much freeze, but I go into silence and I will just go very quiet. And so people who know me well will know that when I'm quiet or just sitting there not saying anything, that there's probably something going on, and I may need to be drawn out. Definitely not fight energy, but I can do that if I'm really, really, really pushed or I'm feeling under threat. I can move to that, but it's definitely not my preferred option. So let's have a look in the chat. What's your default? And you can say silence or violence if you like, or you can say flight, freeze, or fight. Thanks, Chris. Freeze, Monica, silence, Reese. Generally quiet, freeze, definitely tried to quite over the top. Yep, freeze, silence. So I've got a lot on the top part in that silence piece. And it's really important to be able to, one of the myths I think about having hard conversations is that what we say will create a reaction in the other person. Whereas what I love about this model is armor is not a sign, or defensiveness is not a sign of too much candor. It's a sign of not enough safety. So if we have a lot of safety, psychological safety between ourselves in the conversation, then we can have very robust discussions. I know when my son, for example, was a teenager, he's a little bit bigger now, but when he was a teenager, sometimes I would say the smallest things and he would react in a way with that kind of more teenage brain. But when there's a lot of safety there, we can have very tough, robust conversations and we can stay in relationship to each other. So I think that's critically important. Now, thinking about the common errors, when we enter into these conversations, how do we actually do that? What are some practical strategies? Before we move into the practical strategies, I want to talk about some of the common errors. And I think why this is so important is because if you think about those cliff top divers, the people who, I don't know, I think they're crazy. They jump from amazing heights. If you get the first part wrong, then it ends really in a painful way. And I think conversations are the same way. We've got to get the first part right. And so some of the common errors that we see are things like people saying, so how's it going? And what that does, of course, immediately is does a whole number of things. One, it's setting a pretty informal tone. Remember, these are tough conversations. These are not your level 1 cup of coffee conversations. These are the tough conversations that we have. So how's it going? If people feel like this is going to be a performance conversation or something pretty challenging, you've just given them a big out and to tell you all of the things that are getting in the way of them getting the reporting that they should have last Friday or whatever it is. So how's it going? You've lost some momentum as well in the conversation. Sugarcoating, just as it says, kind of wrapping around in sweetness, and people don't really understand what the actual message is. There's another word for that. What the sandwich that we talk about. Pillow talk, it's just too soft. We don't actually know what the person is saying. We might walk out of the conversation going, I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job, or I'm not sure if I'm, not doing a good job. Writing in the script. So while we do need to prepare and think about what we're going to say, what this error is about is really putting the conversation in a box where, hey, when I have this conversation with Lou, is it okay if I use you, Lou? She always responds with this, and then she gets defensive. But I'm going to have to come back around that line of defensiveness, and before you know it, we've kind of crafted and scripted the whole conversation, and so it doesn't have any place to go apart from our predetermined perception of what's happening. So not writing the script, trying to maintain neutrality. And then finally, in the machine gun, and this is where people walk out of a conversation and kind of arm hanging off bleeding because it's been so brutal, obviously, which is just not the kind of conversation we want. And then the opposite of that, these things, which I won't go through in a huge amount of detail, but these common errors are really critical. We see them all the time. I still make them from time to time. So I think it's really great to be able to maintain a focus on them. So preparation is also really important. And Lou, would you mind taking us through some preparation tips?
Sure. So thinking about that pyramid, and that as we move up to the top of the pyramid, the more planning and preparation that is needed. We need to think about what is this conversation demanding of me. And the 4 Ps is essentially preparing yourself, the message, the environment, and the person. So thinking about those 4 areas, what comes to mind for you first as most important? It can be from any of those areas, but just pop them in the chat box. What are the first things that for you that come to mind as most important when preparing for a difficult conversation? And it can be from any of those elements. What are the stories I'm telling myself? Yes, I love that one too, Nicole. I often check knowing the facts. Yes, absolutely. Being clear on the objective facts. Yes. Yes, I always forget to prep myself. I know, Belinda, absolutely. We whether it's through anxiety or just because we haven't thought about conversations in this way, we just sort of dive in, or fear or what may be holding us back. Create safety for oneself by being prepared to act with courage, even if upset. Thank you, Peter. Yes. Goals of conversation, key points to raise. What do you want to achieve? Yes. Yeah. What's the resolution you're looking for? Preparing the message. gathering the facts. Yes, what do I want to say? How do I express myself? What's at risk? Yes, very important. What are the key takeaway? And actions, I'd like to make sure they're clear. Yes, but understand what the other person wants. Yeah. And being open to hearing that, I think, within the conversation. Prepare for the excuses. Yeah, great. So the blockages that may get away and moving forward and finding resolution. Examples. Okay, so you're understanding the full context of what has occurred. Yeah, great. See it. You're getting it. I think you've covered aspects in those comments from all 4 areas there. We do have more detail for you around this. I won't go into full I won't go through all of these elements because you will have access to this recording and you can take time to look at it. But you've named some of these already: preparing yourself, understanding this situation, think broadly about the resolution. What are the options? What are the positives you can see? Again, preparing the message. And all these elements, they're not necessarily relevant for every conversation, but this is to start our thinking about how are we best preparing for this conversation. You've mentioned there through your comments, what is it that you're wanting to communicate, being aware of our own emotional state, staying calm, listening. That's a really important aspect, that listening and actively listening to not only what is said, but the underlying communication is an essential part of good conversation. The next one is preparing the environment. So yeah, really thinking about where can this occur. I think we've all heard of horror stories of the really important feedback conversations, the very, very difficult, that are done in the fishbowl offices, the impact of that. So where is the best place for the conversation that is needed? And then the final one, preparing the person. What does this person need for the best outcome? When do they, when would be best to give them a heads up that this needs to occur, and so forth. And then we've got down there, preparing a safe environment and considering a seating plan. Love it. That's for the person and the environment. So as mentioned, all these points, you will see them in the recording, and they're just to stimulate our thinking around what is needed. So thinking about the planning and preparation, now what's a clear framework? And this is where Phil is about to take us.
Thank you, Lou. Someone has said my audio is crackling, so apologies if that's true for you. Probably nothing I can do about it right this minute, but hopefully it's not too bad. So crucial conversations, there's 3 criteria. The stakes are high, there's opposing opinions, and the strong emotions present. If you have all 3, you're in for a challenging, potentially quite a challenging conversation. So I like that definition, which is from the book Crucial Conversations. So to the framework, and we've been using this framework. In fact, we've been running this module for many, many, many years. And as was introduced, this is one of the favorite and most asked for modules. And one of the reasons is because of this framework. And this is where the rubber really hits the road, and we think about, well, how do we enter into the conversation? How do we do the high dive in a safe, structured, formal way? And this is the framework. So you can see there's 7 steps to it. The first one is name the issue, then select a specific example, describe your emotions about this issue. Why do you think, just pop in the chat, why do you think we might describe the emotions? Because we've just looked at the 4 Ps, which is about one of the preparation steps is to make sure we're not kind of triggered, because often that's not a good place to have a meaningful conversation. But here we're describing our emotions. So why would we be suggesting that? Just pop in the chat, please. Maybe while we're waiting, a few people, how might we describe our emotions as well? To own them, fantastic. Thanks, Samantha. Explains why we need to have the conversation. Love it. Does provide a bit of a foundation, doesn't it? Thanks, Nicole. One of the errors I hear a lot of people talk about at this stage as well is you made me feel, which is not about owning it, right? So we have a very specific way to voice the emotion that we felt at the time, or maybe even presently, but I feel or I felt. not you made me feel, which is kind of giving away your power. So we try not to use that. Then what's at stake? So this could be, the engagement of the team, and in a conflict resolution kind of principled way, what's at stake should be an elevation of our thinking. It should be that something I care about and something the recipient, if you like, of the conversation cares about. So what do you both care about? And that's the at stake piece, not about, just what you care about and the other person doesn't necessarily. Identify your contribution to the problem. This is probably the most controversial step, and I know it says optional there, but I would encourage you to think about what is your contribution to where we're at the moment. It could be, look, I could have been clearer around my expectations. I could have painted done, to use Brené Brown's terms. I could have had this conversation earlier with you, so we didn't end up in this spot. The only time you may not say that is if it's a performance management conversation, and you don't want to say, look, I'm really sorry you're underperforming because I'm a crap manager. So you want to make sure that if you're in that, this is the kind of managing out conversation, that you're not going to be, necessarily admitting to your flaws or things you should have done, which probably won't go well for the overall process. Indicate your wish to resolve the issue, and then invite the other person to respond. So that's the 7 steps. Now, the key with this process is this all happens reasonably quickly, and this is how we actually introduce the conversation. And then it might actually go, like, conversation could be an hour long, where we move to, question and answer, and, it's true dialogue where we're creating safety, and we're really trying to have meaningful dialogue from around the issue and the challenge. And we want to move to a resolution as well. Sometimes the best conversations can be spoilt because nothing actually happens as a result. The zero results, or zero change in behavior, or zero action. So crystal clear on the end. Hey, what's the agreement? What's our new agreement around X, Y, Z? Now, the trick with this framework is all of the first 7 steps happen in 60 seconds. And while we can't hear you, there's always gasps and, oh, that's impossible, or how the heck would you do that? So we keep it really succinct, and we just nail the key points as a really clear, congruent process, a really clear introduction to what's on the table. In the old days, not that I necessarily taught this, but it was always a hamburger with a lot, right? So it was what you're doing well, what you can improve, and what you're doing well. And I still get people today who argue black and blue. That's a great way to do it. But the research suggests not so much, because people walk away potentially just hearing the good stuff and not what you're wanting to deliver. So this framework is really about being clear and honest and congruent about what the challenge is, and putting it on the table very clearly. So we're not holding any of our cards back. We're not trying to trick the other person or manipulate them. It's definitely not a conversation about, hey, so tell me how you're going, which is okay if it's a level 1 conversation. But if it's a crucial conversation, we just put it all on the table, and we do that in 60 seconds. So just by way of example, this is some time ago in my last corporate role, but I asked a member of my team, Chris, I had a call from the head of the Asia Pacific region. Hey, Phil, I want you to run 2,000 of our people through a training program. I handed it off to Chris, and then a month later, the head of the Asia Pacific region rang me and said, hey, no one from your office has spoken to me. So we're actually kind of looking at other providers now, to sort of give you the courtesy of letting you know. So I invited Chris in. We had a conversation. I said, Elmar has just telephoned me and said that no one from the team has contacted him, and I feel pretty frustrated that that's occurred. What's at stake is that we actually may lose this piece of work now. I could have and should have followed up rather than wait to hear from the client 4 weeks later, and I didn't do that. What I'd really like to do, though, is resolve this issue and really understand what actually happened and how this played out. So you'll see in that, 30 seconds, 40, 45 seconds, Chris is super clear on what's happened. And I hopefully demonstrated more of a learning mindset there, not a blaming mindset. So I didn't say, hey, you didn't. And you'll notice the you there with the red cross through it. At no stage did I say you or even use their name. Tried to keep it as neutral as possible without that emotion. So I might just invite people to, in the chat, what do you think of the framework? What are you not sure about? What do you love about it? Have you used this framework? It's been around for quite a long time from Susan Scott in Fierce Conversations. What are your thoughts on the framework? Peter, why is it optional? I agree. I don't think that should be optional. Number 5 about your contribution. Some people really are challenged by coming up with that contribution, but I think if we dig deep, 2 people are a system, right? And all behaviour is co-created in systems language. So I think it is important to own our part. Yep, surface what may be underneath, different personalities and expectations. This is a game changer. Thanks, Nicole. Absolutely. It is a game changer. So we've had such great feedback over many, many years. That's a great point, actually. Leanne, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Which emotions are safe to reveal? I think we have to be authentic, but, I wouldn't say, and as a result, I feel outraged and frustrated and, peed off. But I think we need to be also honest. In my case, for example, I felt frustrated, or it might be just annoyed, or I'm perplexed. But we don't want to have emotionally laden language which might provoke a lack of safety in the conversation. So 60 seconds to get to number 7. Seems as though people may not be able to manage their emotions to be able to respond. Why 60? I think it seems to be a very nice time window, just to be clear and clean. And what the feedback is we get from people after years and years of delivering this framework is that even when the receiver is normally an interrupter, when they can see that you've got a plan and a structure and you've thought it through, and it's nothing wrong with reading notes, by the way, if you wanted to remember all those bullet points, then they're much less likely to interrupt. And in live sessions, so in Leadership Excellence, for example, we do this live in pairs, where it's a role play, of course, and people feel the same, that, wow, I can see you had a plan, it was clear, and then we're able to enter into a conversation. So let me just check the chat. I like how direct it is and gets to the point without blaming. Great framework. Thanks, Geeta. Excellent. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to share with you. So that's kind of the master framework, if you like. This is for, if it's a crucial conversation. So stakes are high, opposing views, or strong emotions. There's 2 other frameworks that don't require quite as much planning and preparation. The first one is, and some of you no doubt have seen this, some of you no doubt teach this, but when, and then we state the facts, I feel or I felt, and then what I would prefer is, and you state your future desired state. So as an example, it might be after a meeting, you may choose to have a conversation with someone who's cutting you off or cutting people off. You might say, when I get cut off in meetings, I feel frustrated and that I don't have a voice. And what I would prefer is that we all have equal share of voice in the meeting. So that's a nice simple one that you can remember. It's not a hard one to remember, like 7 steps. You can do it in the moment. And then the feedback model that we use in teams, so when we're working with an intact team, is the model 2. And this one is what I need more of, less of, or differently. And again, people really seem to connect to this model because it's not about blaming. We're not using the word you. We're not saying, hey, Callie, what you need, excuse me, what you need to do is. We're simply saying what I need more of, less of, or differently is. And it seems to be a very nice way to enter into a conversation. So they're the 2 frameworks. And I might just pause there because we're going to very shortly move into Q&A. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask, please think about them and pop them in the chat now. But by way of wrapping up the content piece of today, these 8 ways to get a difficult conversation back on track, I think, are really critical. So shift the relationship from opposition to partnership. So how do we enter into the conversation together? Reframe your purpose from convincing others to learning. We often come to these conversations I'm going to convince them that they need to do. But actually, if we have a learning frame mindset, we might actually have a much better conversation. Verbalize your intention. So my intention with this conversation is that I want to understand, your behavior around X, Y, Z. Avoid assumptions. So, this is a story we make up. Don't believe everything you think. Examine the other's perspective with openness and curiosity. So Susan Scott talks about each person sees the world in a different color. I might see it in yellow, you might see it in blue. Unless we recognize that then we're going to be kind of at loggerheads around what is the truth. Acknowledge your part, which we've covered off. Learn your ABCs. Ds, avoid blame, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And then seek input to problem solving. So I think this is a really nice summary of some of the things we've talked about. So yeah, based on that, excellent. I'm going to hand back to Kelly, who's going to moderate the Q&A. But if you have them, please pop them in the chat now.
Thanks so much, Phil and Lou. A great piece of content there. I'm sure everyone would agree. I can see Tanya has asked a question in the chat already. Could you please explain why you wouldn't use you and make it general, as she feels that the staff member might generalize the issue to be shared rather than due to their own inaction?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I've never heard someone, so in a conversation, particularly like if it's one-on-one and I'm having this direct conversation with you, it's rare. I have heard it happen maybe a handful of times when someone said, "Are you talking about me?" Yes, I am talking about you. You're invited them in, you're kind of making eye contact, you're having this conversation with them. They will know it's about them. You can sound blamey when you fail to contact the head of the Asia Pacific region versus when no one from our team contacted the head of the Asia Pacific region, because we also might be short of the facts, right? Because Chris may have asked someone else to do it, and they did contact the head of Asia Pacific, just didn't speak to that individual personally, may have spoken to someone in the team. So yeah, you is a little bit blamey, that's all.
Wonderful. And Phil, we've got another question here: how to respond to someone who refuses to acknowledge an issue or seek input into the solution?
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? I really like, in fact, one of Peter, I learned this saying from you, and I still use it many, many years later, is how do we go in their door and take them out yours? And of course, what that means is how do we meet them where they are, and then through conversation, not manipulation, but through conversation, take them to a different place. And I think often we start where we are versus actually what does the other person care about? What might be some of the challenges personally or professionally that they're engaged in at the moment? And I think that point about what's at stake is the piece that connects us as two people in dialogue. What's at stake is, and as I mentioned, it needs to be something they care about as well. And when we teach influencing, so one of our core half-day sessions is influencing without authority. We talk a lot about understanding the other person, what they care about, what are their fears, and talking directly to them, not in a manipulative sense, but in what they care about sense. Some people just won't engage, and I think eventually it's just a number of conversations. And if there's an authority relationship there, so let's say I'm the manager and this person is not engaging, then it becomes, I guess, an escalated conversation where we continue down a different path, which might be about performance management or some kind of remedial development work. So yeah, I hope that answers the question for you.
And Phil, Nicole has asked any key tips about the do's and don'ts in the interaction stage from your experience.
That's a great one, Nicole. I think the biggest takeaway for me is the learning mindset. And I know that sounds very generic and what have you, but as I said, we often enter into these conversations, even with our life partner, right? We enter into it, we think we own the truth. We know all the facts. And if we go into it, it's probably not going to go that well, with that mindset. So if we truly go into it wanting to learn, as well as get our message across, of course, it's not like bending in the wind like bamboo, but making sure that we're clear and we're confident and comfortable in our message. But there's also this other half which is about actually being open to learning and actually having our mind changed. So,
Phil, can I add to that as
yeah,
well?
please.
Because I think I think implicit in that is what you're saying is also that I mentioned before around that the willingness to really listen, even at times if elements may feel challenging or controversial, or like they really impact us and our thinking, and that can be really hard sometimes to really hear difference. That's part of, I suppose, the leadership role, stepping into that pooled share of meaning. Tell me, what is your experience? What is your thinking? How do you see this?
Yeah, great, Lou. I'm just noticing a couple more questions as well. So sorry if we're skipping any, but from Sandra, at what point do you leave the conversation sometimes no matter how much you plan, the other party's not on board? Then how do we exit this conversation? I think it's always it's a commitment to reconvene. One way to do it would be to send that person off to do some reflection or homework, or go and create some learning for themselves, and then come back and have that conversation. Some people may not enter into those kinds of actions. If we go back to one of our first principles is, how do we create safety for them to engage in the conversation? If they're not engaging in it, there'll be some defensiveness, there'll be some wanting to hold on to their identity or hold on to their belief system around the issue or the challenge. And I think by careful conversation and really careful kind of challenge, I think it's that combination of challenge and support in equal doses. So I'm going to challenge your perspective, but I'm also here to support you. It's not going to be, a blamey, direct, horrible conversation. So I don't know, Lou, just to give you, so I'm not answering all of them. Peter's asked a great question there about upward feedback. Do you want to respond to that one?
Sure. So that's a thing. It can be really, I think the first thing I want to say is that can be really scary sometimes for, many leaders. However, I think the framework, it supports the conversation, whether it's in an upward process, because it gives us a solid base. It gives us a foundation. Speaking with leaders, with all our programs, it does take significant courage. I think this is where the courageous piece comes in. But by utilising the framework, as mentioned, it does give you a solid base to start. And you're right. Sometimes when we come in from that way, we've acknowledged the fear or whatever's getting in the way for us having that, utilising the framework, that real change can occur, which is wonderful.
Great, Lou. I'll just see two other questions I'd like to respond to quickly. One was from Reese about removing the emotion from the conversation. Does it risk dehumanizing it? I think that's a really great point. When we talk about removing the emotion, I think it's emotion which is not going to be helpful in the conversation. So if we're angry and our voice and tone has, fire and brimstone, or it's dripping with fire and brimstone, there's a high likelihood all that will do is create defensiveness in the other person, which is why we talk about I feel or I felt as a result. I've been working with some law enforcement agencies where they're trying to reduce the incidence of bullying and all sorts of things in the moment. And what we've taught them is there's not time to go off and necessarily reflect and calm down, but in that moment, how do you, as much as possible, control the negative emotion which might spill over and not make it a constructive conversation? But you have to intervene in that moment. And sometimes you will still have that emotion, and there's nothing much we can do about it if immediacy is required. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I find that it is much more useful to name the emotion rather than have the emotion in the moment. A colleague of ours, a different Peter, talks about, I like to strike when the iron is cold rather than hot, because when it's hot, we can often be triggered ourselves, which usually isn't a useful emotion.
And Phil, adding to that, yeah, so I just want to say, because it connects also with Peter, what Peter was asking about, sort of feedback, giving feedback upwards. upwards, and also the emotional piece. I think this is really connected in the planning and preparation around ourselves. And it's the leadership, it's the self-awareness that's required of leaders nowadays. And I think sometimes what we can do is, if we're feeling really charged, is go to a trusted colleague, talk it through, own what's there so you can help discharge that emotional piece. And then you can name it and you can move forward, you can plan, you can use the framework in a really solid way without that sense of charge. And another element connected with that, particularly if there's a level of fear or just hesitancy in having the conversation, working with this framework, practice saying it out loud, because that can also give you that nice solid base moving into the conversation.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks, Luke. Just because of time, we might just answer Tanya the last question, which is an excellent one. Would you leave the conversation when the other party becomes very emotional? No is the answer. Part of the 4 Ps is, you wouldn't say to someone on a Friday afternoon, hey, I need to have a tough conversation with you on Monday, but hey, have a good weekend. It's not a very safe thing to say or do. And in fact, it's counterintuitive. What most leaders will do in a hard conversation is push on with the message, or even if there's emotion, so I'm going to give you the message in a different way, which hopefully will reduce your emotion. What we strongly recommend is that you stop talking about the content and the message and rebuild safety. And so it might be to get some tissues or a glass of water or what they need. And sometimes what they need might be a break in the conversation and come back the next day with the appropriate kind of support mechanisms around that. Of course, you wouldn't leave someone who is, devastated or highly emotional just to kind of wander off back home. You'd try and provide that support. So, as much as possible, you don't want to leave someone in a highly emotional state when they're leaving the conversation. So I'd spend as much time as was needed, whether that be 10 minutes or 2 hours, to ensure they're in a reasonably good space when they left. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. And thanks so much for all the amazing questions. And I'm going to hand back to you, Kelly.
Thanks, Phil, and thanks, Lou. We've covered some wonderful tips and strategies today about what it takes to be an effective leader. But of course, we know that leadership is so much more than braving crucial conversations or courageous conversations. It can be, so much more, creating a healthy, high-performing team culture where both people and results can thrive. So today, we've given you a bit of a sneak peek, or Phil and Lou have given you a sneak peek into our program, Leadership Excellence. And I wanted now just to spend a moment to give you a quick overview of our Leadership Excellence program, and would encourage you to join us in one of our upcoming programs. So this framework that I'm just going to share now, our human-centered leadership excellence model, this framework is what we think about in terms of really great leadership. So we know it starts with self, and that's right up the top there. And Brené Brown talks a lot about, who we are is how we lead. So leading self is really important. And so then we go outward from there. And often we find that people want to get straight to the implementation, the projects, the performance, or the doing. But, we know that it requires that balance. And the biggest challenge in transformational change is being able to change ourselves. And so we do have a really strong focus on self within this program. Next, as we move around the diagram, you can see that leading teams piece. And of course, most work happens within teams, as we know, making that team leadership element really critical. And we also know that dysfunctional teams can increase stress, lower engagement, and reduce performance as well. So on the flip side, having really effective leaders can create cohesive, high-performing teams and really enhance those results. Again, moving around the diagram, the leading people element, this requires that broader influence, so collaboration and stakeholder management. And then leading the organization, completing that circle there. It doesn't mean that you have to be a senior person or even an executive, but it's more about being able to mobilize people and drive that really meaningful change. And then within the program, we always bring it back to, what's happening in people's roles. So it's very, very much applied. So what's included within our Leadership Excellence program, as you'll see on the screen here, is one 45-minute introductory session and 6 4-hour weekly virtual sessions. There's also some pre and post work that's included within our online resource centre, the Hub, some surveys and some additional webinars as well. There's also structured leadership workshops delivered by, of course, our expert facilitators, supported by online resources and that learning development workbooks. And we also have some bonuses as well. So the HBDI Start Thinking profile is also included within the program. And if you've not heard of this tool before, it's a really powerful tool that's used to help us understand our different thinking preferences. So breaking them down into 4 quadrants: the what, which is the blue quadrant there, focused on data and facts; the why, which is the yellow quadrant, driven by the vision and the purpose; the how, which is the green, focused on processes and systems; and the who, the red, concerned with relationships and human impact. So what makes this tool really powerful is that it's supported by neuroscience. So it's not just about personality or behavior, it's about how our brains are wired to think in different ways. So it'll help you understand why you think the way you do. And just as importantly, it helps us understand those around us as well. We've also got the Actionable Habit Builder, which is based on nudge theory, included in this program. So you'll have access to this technology. And we all know that changing or creating a habit can be really challenging. So this nudge technology works on a schedule which is designed by you and can track your progress really easily, with the option of journaling as well. So within the program, you'll also have an accountability buddy to help with this, and you'll be able to comment and keep track on each other through the process. We also have our leadership capability model here that you can see on the screen, which outlines the program content for each of the 6 workshops in this program. So you'll see here how each workshop, starting from the bottom there, builds upon the last and really reflects that human-centered leadership model I just mentioned. So sessions 1 and 2 focusing on self, sessions 3 and 4 are around that teams piece, and then sessions 5 and 6 focus on leading people and then leading through change as well. So our upcoming programs, if you would like to come and join us and take that next step in your leadership journey, we would love to have you in our Leadership Excellence program. You'll see our upcoming program dates here on the screen. And of course, if you would like to, please reach out to speak with us about collaborating with your organisation to deliver an in-house program as well. And I'm also going to pop into the chat the link here for our Leadership Excellence program. So if you would like to join us, we do have a special offer because you've joined us on today's webinar. Our normal price is $17.50, and today you can use the code webinar to save $400 on our upcoming programs. And pretty exciting, we've also got a fast action bonus. So anyone that joins the program within the next 24 hours will go into the draw to win a HBDI Start Thinking 60-minute individual debrief with one of our brilliant coaches. And finally, I also wanted to cover just a little bit about some of our development streams, which is, I guess, our broader overview here of what we offer. So the individual stream is where our Leadership Excellence program fits in, along with executive coaching, which can be supplemented by individual profiling tools as well, like 360s. Then we've got the team element where we work a lot with top teams, so executive teams, leadership teams, high-performing teams, and we also have a wonderful diagnostic tool as well. And then, of course, on the organisational excellence component, and that centres really around a whole systems approach, which is what organisational excellence is really all about. Phil, I might pass back to you to talk about the free gift that we are sharing today.
Amazing. Thank you, Kelly. So my own book, the one I wrote as a solo author, Leadership Without Silver Bullets, which has a lot of very strong themes around adaptive leadership, having hard conversations, courageous leadership, etc. So we would love to make that available. We'd love for you to just post on LinkedIn and say that you've been to this webinar and how good it was. And if you just can tag myself, we'll know that you've done it. And I will direct message you and get your address, and would love to send you 1 or 2 copies. If you wanted a second copy for a decision maker or something, very happy to send those to you. So yeah, that's the offer. So did you want to wrap up, Kelly?
Yeah, thank you so much, Phil and Lou. You've shared some fantastic insights. I know, I've learned a lot today, and I can tell by the chat that everyone has gained some value from being here on the webinar. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we hope to see you in the Leadership Excellence program. We'll also be sending out a recording once it's ready, along with another tool for those who are you're actively running meetings, our meeting effectiveness scorecard, that will be in there along with the recording. And we also encourage you to share it with your colleagues as well. So thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
See you on the next webinar.